Hi, everyone. I am Brian Pontalillo. I'm the editorial director at Fine Homebuilding and Green Building Advisor. And I'm going to take a few minutes to introduce tonight's program while you all get into the webinar and get situated and check out the functionality of the Big Marker platform tonight. So you are joining us for a webinar about moisture management and the Schluter Shower Systems. And I'm just going to quickly share two things that have always impressed me about Schluter-Systems. And I've sort of been able to watch these products evolve over the past 20 years or so, covering this industry at Fine Homebuilding. And the first thing that impresses me is that over the last couple of decades, I've really seen these sort of their solution-based products allow designers and builders to expand design possibilities around tiled spaces and to do that with confidence. And so we get tons of really awesome bathrooms pitched to us for stories at Fine Homebuilding, and lots of beautiful tile work. And more often than not, when we dig into the information, we find out that behind that tile is Schluter-Systems products, and so that's really cool. And the second thing is that this company does an awesome job of training, and they offer that training really to anyone who wants to learn how to use their products. And I think that's really cool also, too, because to be able to do this kind of work with confidence, you need that kind of training. So it's really exciting stuff, and I think that's why I'm excited about tonight's webinar. And then I guess the last thing I need to do before disappearing from the screen for the evening is to introduce the host of tonight's program, Andy Acker. Andy is himself an experienced professional tile setter, 20 years of professional experience, and he's been with Schluter for 23 years. Right now, he is their director of education. So Andrew is the guy responsible for programs like this, as well as their in-person trainings, which you probably already know a lot of this about Schluter if you're here tonight, but they do these trainings all across North America, and they do a great job at trade shows and all sorts of in-person events. So I highly encourage you, if you want to just grow your skills as a tile setter and learn to use their products better, to check out even beyond tonight what they have to offer. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Andrew. Welcome, Andrew, and thanks for being here.
Well, thanks, Brian. I appreciate it. We appreciate the invite to come and host one of your webinars. You do quite a few of these yourself, as we do. So we're really delighted to be your guest tonight and to give this presentation. Also really delighted about how many people signed up for this particular topic. We find that this is very, very popular topic at our events too, whether there are live stream webinars or our in-person training. So we're going to get going on it in just a minute. There are a couple of people behind the scenes that are going to help us out here. Brian mentioned that if you use the Q&A, you can type in some questions. I want to introduce you to a couple of the guys that are going to be actually the resources. They'll be at the other end, and they're going to be answering your questions as best as they can possible. So let's start with Andy Gallio. Andy, welcome to the event here.
Thank you, Andy, and welcome everybody. Great pleasure for me to be with you folks tonight. Very excited to be with Fine Homebuilding. Look forward to our interaction this evening. Look forward to your questions, and certainly am thankful to help you as we go along. Have a good session. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Andy. The other fellow who will be also answering questions and answers is Hugo Sanchez. You want to say hello, Hugo?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me tonight, Andy. My name is Hugo Sanchez, and I'm coming live from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. And I'm happy to be working tonight to be helping out as the moderator. So back to you, Andy.
Okay, thanks, Hugo. And last but not least, the guy who's actually going to do some work around here today, that would be Alfredo. So Alfredo's going to do some a bit of a demo for us to show us some of the fine points. So say hello to everybody there, Alfredo.
Hi, everyone. Like Andy said, my name is Alfredo Villanosi. I'm coming to you live from Schluter-Systems here in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. And I'm really excited to be doing this tonight. My first time doing such a big event. Really excited.
Okay, I think excited also means a little nervous, Alfredo. So that's okay. you're an accomplished trowel guy. So we'll be
Thank
looking
you.
forward to joining you here in a little bit. So we'll see you then. Thank you.
All right. See you in a bit.
All right. So, yeah, Alfredo and Hugo are both, actually, we're all from the education department at Schluter-Systems. Hugo and Alfredo are out of our Montreal office. Andy is out of our Reno, Nevada office, and I'm out of no office. I'm actually coming to you from my office in my home in Kansas City, Missouri. So we see people that have joined up from all over North America. So again, welcome. So we're going to jump in here and get started. This is a moisture management presentation and the Schluter Shower System. And you may be wondering why we're using the term moisture management instead of just waterproofing. And that's because we're going to take a little bit more of a holistic approach to liquid in both our water in both its liquid and its vapor form. And that'll unfold for us here in the next few minutes. So we're going to define the term moisture management and see what we're really trying to achieve when we manage moisture inside of a building, inside of a dwelling. We're going to look at the types of systems that are recognized by the tile industry that you could address this issue. We're going to just segue over to the shower types from Schluter-Systems, all of our products and our materials that really do have a system approach to this. And then we're going to do the demo with Alfredo. And then we'll go back and wrap it up and show you some of the resources we have available for you. So how much water are we really talking about here? Well, if you look here, the average shower, if you only had a shower used once a day, and that duration of that shower was 12 minutes long, which is the average shower from the EPA. And by the way, that shower head is a 1.5 gallon per minute flow rate shower head. You're still talking about 1,100 inches of rainfall a day inside your home. And for comparison, we have Seattle, which is considered one of those rainy places, but really there's a lot of other places that get a lot more rainfall. But for comparison, you get an idea that we're dealing with a tremendous amount of water in a place like a shower environment. So, and we go to great lengths to preserve moisture sensitive building materials from being exposed to this type of moisture on the outside of our house where we get a fraction of the rain, but inside we're sort of lax on many occasions. So we really want to unfold what we're dealing with and what and how to address this. So you can see here the shower is only 3 years old, and it's already showing the telltale signs of not having adequate moisture management. We've actually blown up the little corner there that you can see in the inset picture, showing what is actually going on in that area there. You can see the telltale signs, some grout discoloration, and a lot of people will go, oh, how do I get rid of some mold on my grout or some discoloration of the grout? And what we can understand and what we're learning is the source is behind the tile. It might be on the surface where it's showing, but actually the source of the moisture content and where the problem really lies is behind the tile. So that's where we want to look at. And many times when we take the tile off, this is what we see, where there hasn't been proper moisture management, and we've got an adverse effect on the moisture sensitive building materials that are behind the shower, that in this case were used to build a bench. Now, if we strip this bench off even further and look down into it, we can see what we mean by moisture sensitive building materials. It's not that you can't use these type of materials to build some of the things that we like to put in showers, like benches and niches and the walls and the curbs, but we need to treat them in such a way that they're never going to be exposed to moisture content. Another thing that we're seeing here on the screen, and this is something that we've been telling people for a long time, and a lot of times you'll find the homeowner, the consumer, is not aware that just because you tile something, that it's waterproof. The tile is a veneer. It's a decorative wear surface. And what we're really doing is relying on a system to manage the moisture that's behind the tile. So let's keep that in mind as we go forward. So as I said earlier, we're going to be able to manage moisture in both its liquid and its vapor form. So when we look at the actual definition of moisture management, it's managing this in both its liquid and vapor form, and it's able to evacuate any moisture content that gets into this environment back out efficiently without adversely affecting the moisture sensitive building materials or not exposing them to it in the first place. So, or not introducing them in the first place. So there's different ways to do this we're going to look at all of that as we move forward. So how about the vapor? A lot of time we think about waterproofing in the liquid form, but how about the vapor or gas form? How does that happen? How does vapor drive occur? Well, I'm sure many of you that are tuning in to this webinar tonight are more well-versed on building science than I am. But we are going to be very simple in our explanation here about what's going on and how does vapor drive occur here in our shower environment. So when a shower is being used, the air inside the shower is typically warmer and it contains more moisture than the air that's on the opposite side of the tile veneer and assembly, as you see here in the picture in the wall cavity in the stud bay. So one of the laws of thermodynamics is that cold always goes towards warm. So the warm and moist air is going to drive into the cooler and drier air to equalize. Nature doesn't like things out of equilibrium, so the drive is going to go in that way. So what we're really looking for here is a way to keep the moisture content from accumulating quicker than it can dissipate. Well, this really wasn't a problem back before we made our houses so energy efficient. Now that we make our houses so tight for energy efficiency, this has now become a greater issue for us. And that's why we understand the building science much better than we did just a couple of decades ago. So that's what we're looking at, is slowing down the vapor drive. You don't want to make it so tight that the house doesn't breathe, of course, but we want to always retard the moisture and vapor traveling through or driving so it never accumulates quicker than it can dissipate back out. So, and about mold, I think maybe we should just take a minute to understand mold. And many times this is something that you can use with the homeowner or consumer as just besides for yourself. There's really 4 factors that need to be in place to promote mold and mildew growth, to have an environment that they can actually dwell in. One is water. I think we all could have guessed that they needed a water source, and it has to be a constant water source. It has to be available all the time. Many of the molds that we find in our dwellings in the materials we use to build our homes and buildings, the kind of molds that we get in there can actually become dormant for an extended period of time if it does dry out. But then after even an extended period of time, if it gets wet again, reanimates, which means it can start reproducing and leaving spores again. So water has got to be there. It's got to be a constant source. Neutral to acidic pH level. This is interesting because the pH has got to be neutral, and neutral is about 7 on the pH scale. What's interesting about this is when we use a lot of the materials to build our showers, such as mortar, the traditional mortar that we would pack inside a pan or maybe even apply to the walls, thin set mortar that we use to bond tile, the grouts, all of these things, even concrete backer boards, they're all very high on the pH because they are Portland cement based. They could be 10.5 up to 12 on the pH scale. So you might ask yourself, well, how do we end up down to neutral, 7 or lower on the acidic side in order to have mold and mildew growth? Because we know we get mold in these showers. Well, the answer is we need the third factor to be introduced by the first factor. So in other words, the organic food source is the stuff that gets introduced via the water. So the water is the vehicle that introduces this material into the tile assembly. And as it starts accumulating in the tile assembly, the water bringing it in, then you start getting the pH lowered and lowered where this organic material can get introduced. And if you guess what we're talking about with organic material in a shower, think about what goes on in a shower. We're talking about shampoo residues and soap scum and body oils and all of these things that can be in the water that end up in the assembly. And the fourth one is temperature. It doesn't, temperature for mold and mildew, they like to inhabit the same kind of environment that the human like to live in. It doesn't like to boil, doesn't like to freeze, right? So there's your 4 factors. So if you think about those 4 factors for a couple of minutes, which one do you think we have the most control over, that we can actually mitigate to have control over this mold and mildew? Well, it turns out that the key to mold control is controlling the moisture. That's why we're looking at moisture management in both a liquid and vapor form here. So let's move forward. We certainly don't want to get to this point. And I know this picture is a little melodramatic, but what we're trying to say is we don't want to end up in the spot where the consumer is so concerned about mold and mildew with tile because they had a bad experience that they stop selecting it as a suitable material. Actually, tile in general is a great material for a wetter environment because it is very hygienic. It's very durable. And of course, the aesthetics is something that the consumer is also very concerned about and motivates them to look at tile. So keep that in mind also. So let's look at the type of showers that are out there and readily available. So there's basically two general categories of waterproofing methods that are recognized by the tile industry. One is the traditional system that's been around for probably over 100 years now, called a water in and water out assembly. And we'll see in a minute why that's its nickname. But this is your traditional system where you use a pan liner and pack mortar inside the pan liner, and you have a two-stage clamping drain assembly and so forth. And the other system is the bonded waterproof systems. Now, their approach to moisture management is fundamentally different between the two. One allows moisture to get into the assembly, manages it and contains it, and then evacuates it through secondary drainage. The system on the other side is a bonded system, which is sealed and never lets any water get into the system to begin with. That's how fundamentally different they actually address or approach the same challenges. So we're going to take a look now at the traditional system. We have an animation here showing the components and how they all work together to actually produce this type of system. So if you will, we'll go ahead and start this video here, and I'll give you a little bit of a play-by-play as we put the assembly together. Now, there is some kind of solid backing on the wall, so we're going to remove that to make room for the thickness of the pan liner, but the pan liner needs to be supported and it's vertical, so we put blocking between the studs. Now you see what's called a pre-slope. So there's a slope down to the drain before you put the pan liner in. The pan liner is extended at least 3 inches above finished height of the curb, up and over the whole curb, and there's a one-piece joint put where the curb meets the return wall. Now that we put a test plug in there, we can fill it full of water, and typical testing period is about 24 hours. So we let the water stand in there and actually make certain we don't have any leaks. There were no punctures. There was no spot that we missed in there to make certain that it can hold water. Now, once that period's over, then we're going to start more of the tile assembly. So now we put a vapor barrier on the walls, a lath, and traditional mortar. So this is an old school mud job here. Same thing on the curb. We put the lath over the curb without any punctures in the pan liner at all. We establish the height of the first course of tile, and we actually tile the walls. We put some spacers around the weep holes, the secondary drainage, to keep them getting clogged. We pack the pan, put our bond coat on, tile the thing, and now we start using the shower. So how is this thing actually functioning? Certainly a lot of the water that's being used here in the shower is going directly down the drain. That's what you see when you take a shower. But if you look closely, there is residual water that gets into the assembly. This is actually how it's designed to work. That's why the manufacturers of these drains and the tile industry require secondary drainage, i.e. weep holes put down at the drain. So that allows any residual water that gets into the assembly, it gets captured and confined by the pan liner, and the pan liner has a slope that slopes down towards the drain, and now you can go ahead and put the other clamping ring on, and the water that's got into its system makes its way down to the secondary drainage, and out it goes. That's why it's called water in and water out. That's how it manages. That's how the design is entailed to use. Now, as I said, this has been around for a very long time and can be actually used quite well if you follow each and every little item as far as how it works and how it contributes. You can see each component contributes to how this thing overall actually functions. So there's many steps and stages. There's plenty of places here where mistakes are made by uneducated people who are trying to put these in. We see a lot of stuff like that going on out there. We're not making a claim that these don't work. We're just saying these are very labor intensive and they are prone to a lot of places where there could be a little mistake made. And when you come to water, there's no such thing as a little mistake, is there? So That's the original system, and that's how it functions. Now we can go to a sealed system, and we can see the fundamental difference and approach to moisture management in this system. So we'll go ahead and run this animation that we're going to see here. So what we're looking at is the finished shower as we actually move in closer to see it. Very similar to the other shower, 3 walls, tiled, a curb, and a door here. This nice large format tile. So we're going to remove all the assembly and start putting in the moisture management system. The first thing we're going to do is put the sheet applied membrane. In this case, it's a Kerdi membrane, and it's going to be put directly over drywall as far as we're concerned. You might need to use a green rock or purple rock in your jurisdiction, but you can put the Kerdi directly over there. And we showed you could do a lap seam, 2-inch overlap, or you could do a butt seam and put a Kerdi band, a thinner band, over that butt seam. Now, since we can use drywall, gypsum panel for this, and we cut holes in it, exposing the vulnerable core, you can see we used a mixer valve seal and a pipe seal to seal it up good and tight. This happens to be one of our trays that's pre-sloped and has the Kerdi already on it. So we're going to use that there. And we're going to use a curb made out of our high density foam board called Kerdi board. And now we're going to start the waterproofing. We tie it all together. You can see we have 1-piece corners. We're going to put in all the corners, and also one for that trouble-prone spot right there where the curb meets the vertical. You can see we have a 1-piece corner for there too. Now we just need to connect those inside corners with the banding that's going to do the pan to wall connection, again with the Kerdi band folded lengthwise down the middle to do all the banding. And now we've got it all sealed up and ready to go. How about this spot? That's always been a trouble-prone spot on the outside where the front of the curb meets the wall on the outside. Now we're putting in our integrated bonding flange and then sealing that up tight so it's all sealed together. We're going to let it sit at least 15 hours if you use some of our thin set. If you need a quicker time frame, it can be 6 hours of setting time before flood testing, as you're watching now, if you use a rapid setting thin set. But we're going to flood this, and still customary time frame for letting it sit with water to make certain that we don't have any leaks would be a 24-hour period. Now, this particular shower we're going to make as maintenance-free as possible. So we're actually going to use one of our inside corner movement joints that's going to take the place of the grout, so you'll never have to re-grout or caulk those corners. This tile, as you saw earlier, was a large format tile and didn't come with any trim. So we're actually using alternatives to trim with some of our profiles. Now we put all the tile in except for the tile right around the drain. The drain grate assembly has a height adjustment collar that allows you to adjust for several different thicknesses of tile. And then we're going to set it down and get it in flush with the tile. So the drain grate is actually put in by the tile setter when they're tiling. And then we grouted the thing, let the grout cure, and now we're using this shower. Now, how is this shower different from the other shower we just showed you earlier of the traditional system? Well, this one is all sealed up. All the water goes down the drain. There's no water that gets through the waterproofing, if you will, the Kerdi. So the only thing that's going to be exposed to water is actually the grout lines themselves. And since the grout is exposed to air and isn't going to trap any moisture, this shower is going to dry out in a fraction of the time of a traditional. Matter of fact, after only a few hours, these grout lines are dry, where if you had to go to a traditional system and wait for it to get as dry as a Kerdi shower is after a few hours, you'd actually have to stop using that shower for several months. Believe it or not, you would, in order to have a traditional shower as dry as a sealed system as a Kerdi system there. Now, there's a couple of approaches on how to get to this point with the sealed system, and I did want to bring those up. The most two popular methods out there are roller applied or liquid applied membranes you put on with a roller or a brush. The other is the sheet applied, which we just saw in the animation. So we're going to take a look at both of these. So the liquid applieds are quite popular, but I just wanted to caution you about them. Now, you can see here that you're going to have to wait until the material that you're going to paint them on is very, very dry for them to accept that material. And then they have to dry before they accept tile. They're going to be various thicknesses required by various manufacturers. So check with the manufacturer about the mill thickness requirement in order to get waterproofing. And they may even have a different mill thickness requirement to get to a vapor drive, to a perm rating that's going to be, you're going to want in that environment. So keep that in mind, that many thicknesses, some dry quickly, some of them dry slower. They have multiple coats, so keep that in mind. Some of them require reinforcing fabric in the corners or where there's a seam in the board. They all require a modified thin set mortar, which means you're now introducing a latex that may have a prolonged wet time that you're going to have to wait for it to dry out before that shower can be used. So keep those in mind when you look at the liquid applieds. We're not stating they don't work. We're just saying just follow the manufacturer's instructions, which is always important with any product we use from any manufacturer, to make certain we follow their specific requirements and directions for installation. We certainly appreciate that at Schluter, and I'm sure the manufacturers of these liquid applieds would do that too. So the nice thing about the Curdy is you don't build it up to any thickness on the job site. We manufacture it at the thickness required. You can see it's 8 mils thick, which is pretty thin, right? A mil is not short for a millimeter. A mil is actually a 1/1000th of an inch. So our product is actually 8 1/1000ths of an inch. And even at that, it still is below 1 perm to give you not only a good waterproofing, but also good for your vapor proofing too. If you're doing a steam room, you have exterior walls, we want to keep that vapor drive down, as we talked about earlier, to very, very low amount of migration into the wall cavity behind the tile assembly. So it's waterproof and vapor tight. There's no organic material in there, so we don't have any potential food source for mold and mildew, as we looked at earlier. As I said, uniform thickness off the roll. The grid lines are kind of nice for cutting it and laying it out. And of course, it meets the American National Standards Institute requirement for bonded, load-bearing bonded waterproof membranes, which is ANSI 118.10. So keep all of that in mind. So let's look a little bit more at this particular system and what we have here. Some of the key benefits of this system here is that it is waterproof and vapor tight. It will prevent the leakage because, again, it's a sealed system as opposed to a water in, water out. And it prevents mold growth because of what I stated earlier. There's no water getting into the assembly. There's no organic material on top of the waterproofing. And of course, since it dries out in hours between uses, you break that one of the 4 requirements that we need, which is a constant water source. We break that constant water source. Not only that, but we don't introduce an organic material into an assembly because it is a sealed system. So that's why we say it prevents mold growth. Also, it's all inclusive. It's a system, Schluter-Systems, you kind of get it, where it has all the components that you need. So they're all integrated to work together. It's fairly light and it's very simple and very quick to install. You can really cut down the amount of time you typically spend in preparation for tiling of these type of showers between the traditional and the sealed system. You can cut down your time pretty considerably by going to these kind of integrated components. So we saw a lot of these components when we were watching the animation. We certainly saw the Curdy, the sheet applied membrane going directly over the wall. We saw the mixture valve seal and the pipe seal to make certain it was sealed up there at those junctions. We looked at the inside corners and the outside corners and the banding. And we didn't really look at Curdy board, but we do have a product called Curdy board that you could use in lieu of putting, say, a drywall or a backer board on the wall and then covering it with a sheet applied membrane like Curdy. You can actually put the Curdy board on the wall. That's the panel and the waterproofing all at once. You just need to treat the seams and the fasteners. And Alfredo will show us a little bit of that when we get to him. So keep that in mind. We also make those trays that you saw in the video. You don't have to use the tray, actually. You can still screed your mortar bed, your traditional mortar bed, to our Curdy drain. And then just apply the Curdy over the top of the mortar bed right down onto the integrated bonding flange. So it's nice to have that adaptability or flexibility between using a pre-formed tray or still doing a mortar bed where you might have a drain that's really offset in a funny spot where we don't have one available for you, even though you can cut our trays down and move them around a bit, you might want to do it for that reason, or maybe you've got a really big shower or an odd shape, or maybe you just like to pack the mortar beds, but you can certainly use our drain with our trays, of course, or with a traditional mortar bed, and then cover it with Kerdi as we showed you on the walls in the animation. So we have those. Also line drains. We have different trays for our line drains instead of our point drain that we're showing here. Okay, so again, they're easy to cut size, no need for a mortar bed, but if you do need to extend on a bit, you can do that with our thicker Kerdi boards that we make that match the thickness of the trays. You can do that with the dry pack, which we're showing here in one of the photographs of extending the tray. Then we're just going to cover that with some of that Kerdi, as you saw, our sheet applied membrane, to cover that seam with a 2-inch overlap onto the tray that already has Kerdi. And then, of course, our Kerdi band that'll turn up the walls as we saw in the animation. This is really the key element that's been missing for so long, ladies and gentlemen, in the tile industry. For so many years, the tile industry only had the drains that were afforded to us from the plumbing industry. And all the drains from the plumbing industry were designed to accommodate the waterproof membrane under the mortar bed, down on the floor on the clamping ring level. So what we needed as a tile industry was some sort of drain that accommodated surface waterproofing, well, up at the surface, up on top of the mortar bed. So that's why Mr. Schluter came out with the Kerdi drain, called an integrated bonding flange. And you can see that that's going to integrate with the surface waterproofing. This doesn't go down under the mortar bed. It goes flush with the top of the mortar bed. Or as you saw in the animation, you'll see here in the demonstration shortly, it'll be flush with the Kerdi tray itself. And then we saw the height adjustment collar, the lateral adjustment ring, and the grate and frame that are all part of the system. They all work together, and again, they go in into the drain by the tile setter. Now, as far as who puts the drain in, that could still be the plumber or the general or whoever you're going to do, the remodeler. Those drains come in ABS or PVC plastic for glue-up joints. We also have them in stainless steel if you have a requirement for a metal drain in those type of applications too. Lots of different great options as far as the colors and finishes to match the rest of your trim that's in the bathroom. And then you can see the tileable grate, the one in the inset down in the bottom right. That's a really popular one because then you see no drain. You can see that you just put a piece of tile or pieces of tile, if it's a smaller mosaic, onto that drain grate, that tileable grate, and then you don't see the drain at all. The water just evacuates around the edge, the perimeter of that tile or tiles. So very popular there. Also, some of our designer series that we have that are getting very popular. You can see 3 of our design series here: Curve, Floral, and Pure. Those are some. Also, we have trays that are very, very thin, which allows you to do curbless. So this allows you to have a very, very thin transition out onto your floor where you can remove the curb. Very popular for design or for actual need for accessibility. And you can see the inset picture, how you can put these in here. Very thin, easy to recess the floor a little bit, or actually add on a little bit of thickness to the floor surrounding the tray, or actually use a ramp that we have in our product line that's going to bring you up to that height of our tray. So keep in mind that we have some very thin trays also. As I mentioned earlier, the line drains, very popular, very nice because you're not limited to the size tile you can put on the tray. You know, any size tile will fit on the tray. Since it's one flat plane sloping down towards the drain, it makes this ability to run large format tiles that the consumer really likes and not have to stop them at the shower, but run them right into the shower. So keep that in mind. In the picture there, if you take notice, you can see the drains actually at the front of the shower, and it's going to intercept the water before it runs out onto the floor of the bathroom. This actually brings the threshold, or the lack of threshold, between the bathroom floor and the drain even lower. So it's actually at the same height as the floor surrounding it. So keep that in mind. That's kind of a nice detail. And again, we have different types of drain grates, tileable, and our other design series here also in the line drains. So some of the other types of components that we have here, design elements that the consumer really likes. The niches. Niches are very popular, place for shampoo and various accoutrements that you would put in your shower. Of course, the curbs. We used to spend a lot of time building curbs and then making certain they're waterproof and so forth. And you can see how easy it would be to introduce a curb into a shower with our Curdy board curbs or our bench. Design elements. Consumers love to have a bench in their shower. You can build them out of Curdy board, or we actually have them pre-made in various shapes and sizes that you could get there too. And the ramp that I mentioned earlier, that's in the front of the benches. You can see that there. Also, how about other types of shelves that you could actually introduce into your bathroom area here to actually go with your drain grate and complement the trim that you've put and the finish that you've put on your shower head and your mixer valve and so forth. So those are very nice too. So we're at that point here where we're going to actually join Alfredo. You met Alfredo a little earlier. He's the one who's actually going to be doing some of the demos. So we'll be joining Alfredo here on the set, and we're going to show you a couple of scenarios. We're going to do a little bit of work, just some of the highlights here, right, Alfredo, as we go along? We'll be doing those. Okay.
That's right.
So what are you going to do here? It looks like you've got Curdy board on the wall to your left. So as I talked about a little bit earlier, and you have most of that on there. So we'll get to that in a minute, but directly in front of you, it looks like you've got some of the Curdy on the wall, and that's over drywall. It looks like we're using just standard run-of-the-mill drywall right there.
That's correct. Now I'm just going to finish it off up to my 7-foot mark. So I'm just going to put a little strip, and I'm going to overlap 2 inches on top of my Curdy that's already installed. I could have also butted it up together and run a 5-inch band to seal up that seam, but it's easier and quicker just to overlap 2 inches on top of the existing one.
Okay. Folks, we just wanted to show you a little bit of this process of how to apply the Curdy, to show you how easy and simple it is and how quickly it goes. So we've already done most of this for you off camera before, but now we're just going to complete this, as Alfredo said. So just a small piece here. So what Alfredo did is he took a sponge that was a little bit damp and he just applied a little bit of moisture to this drywall. We don't want this drywall that could be kind of thirsty. We don't want its first drink of water to be the water out of our bond coat, which is a thin set that Alfredo's putting on. Plus, when you're on the job site, when you get started, there could be some dust and residue and potential bond breaker that's actually on the panel, whether it's drywall or not. If this was concrete backer unit, it's going to be very thirsty, and you're definitely going to want to give it a little bit of a drink of water, as you saw Alfredo do with the sponge and with a wetted sponge. So now we're using a very small notch trowel. I think this is about a 3/16 V notch, or what is it? We call this the Curdy trowel, but it's actually a very small U notch trowel. What does that say, Alfredo? 3.5 millimeter square notch. Very small. Oh, we can't hear you. Your mic's off. Anyway, yeah, I think it's about 3.5. There it is. Okay. Yeah, 8 by 8 square notch or 3 millimeter square notch. In other words, folks, it's a very small amount of thin set that you need to apply the Curdy onto whatever the substrate is. So Alfredo's got that on there. He already told us that he's going to do a 2-inch overlap instead of a butt seam with a piece of Curdy band. Again, your option. This makes it very quick and easy to put on, where you don't have to introduce a Curdy band. Tape there that's applied. You can see, a little holiday there at the end. Good catch. And he just simply places it up there and puts it on and gets it in position. And now he's using a drywall blade here to press it in. So all the object is here with that small amount of thin set that we're using is to firmly embed the Curdy into the bond coat, knocking down the ribs and evacuating any air bubbles or blisters from underneath the membrane. So you could use a steel trowel. You could use the flat side of your notch trowel that you have to apply the thin set. Alfredo's opting for a drywall blade. That's fine, but you can see that that's all there is to the process to put that on. And he only went up as high as the shower head. If you look on the adjacent wall where he's already put the shower head seal in place, and the mixer valve seal is in place too. We just kind of out of camera angle. One other thing that we want to see here is the Curdy board. I mentioned the Curdy board comes in various thicknesses. This is going to be a 1/2-inch Curdy board he's using directly over the studs, and we're putting the fasteners in at every 12-inch increments. Oh, very good. So you can see a little washer. The washer is required in order for us to eliminate 50% of the fasteners. Instead of the fasteners needing to be at every 6 inches, they can be every 12 inches. And you can see a little screw fastener that's going to go in there. And he's just going to put that fastener into that washer and crimp it down so it's just a little below the surface so it doesn't trip him up when he does a little patch over the top of here. Now, we're not going to do all the patches on this demo. We'll look over at the next demo where we actually have those done. But we're going to show you the process of how to actually do this where we've actually punctured a hole in the Curdy board with the fastener. So we put that in place. Another nice thing about using Curdy board, if your studs aren't straight, you can actually shim the studs with the same thin set and then push the board into the Curdy board into the thin set on the studs with a long straight edge or a level, and you can true up the studs by using thin set. Then put the fasteners in, but don't drive them all the way home and squish all the work you did. Actually let them firm up a little bit, and then you can finish the process. So you can see Alfredo just put those small patches that he cut out of, I guess, Curdy board or Curdy band. There, Alfredo, you just cut little sections out of our 5-inch wide Curdy band? Sure. Okay. So now he's got his mic off so we don't have to listen to that scratching sound of his notch trowel over the substrate, but you get the idea. Same process as we just did on the drywall. This happens to just be on Curdy board, but now that's totally sealed up and ready for tile once he gets all the rest of those fasteners done. So that's the process, whether you're using Curdy board over studs or you have a drywall or a green rock or a purple rock or even a concrete backer unit on the walls already, and then you're going to apply the Curdy to it to have a sealed system. Either way, that's what we just showed you there. So now let's take our focus on down onto the tray. I know you folks saw this in the animation, but we wanted to spend just a couple of minutes here showing this to you where we can do it on our time. So again, the same process as you saw Alfredo do earlier. Remove any possible contaminants, dust, bond breaker, and not really getting the floor totally wet, but just adding a little moisture again so that the first drink of water that you're oh yeah, look at the dirt coming off of that. We certainly would not want that underneath there because it could be a potential bond breaker. So again, now he's going to be using the thin set where we're going to go to a much larger notch trowel here. This is going to be a 1/4 inch wide by 3/8 inch deep notch trowel. That's going to give us ample support of the tray when we embed it in there and adhere that tray right onto the floor. So you can see the thin set's fairly loose. And one of the techniques that we always use in the tile industry in general, tile installation 101, is that you always apply the thin set to the substrate with the flat side of the trowel, making certain that you're really working it into the surface. The nickname we use in the tile industry is called burning in the thin set into the substrate, into the floor or the wall. We're going to make sure it keys in and is really bonded well, and then he's going to turn his notch trowel around and use that notch side, again, 1/4 wide, 3/8 deep, and actually gauge how much thin set he's leaving on the floor in order to put the tray down. If you imagine the tray is a big piece of tile, you're going to want to use a big old notch trowel in order to embed the tile to make certain it's properly supported. So this tray here, I believe, it looks like maybe one of our 4-foot squares, or maybe one a little bit smaller, maybe a meter square. I can't quite tell from the camera angle here what we're using, but nonetheless, it is one of our trays that's got the slope already built into it on the top and actually has the Curdy bonded to it also. So as Alfredo finishes up the spreading of the thin set and the gauging of how much thin set he's leaving there, he's doing that with that notch trowel, getting that all in place. There we go. Okay. So this tray, now, hey, before you put that down, Alfredo, can you show us the edge of that to show us how it's tapered towards the drain? There you go. That's a great angle there. You can see that it's thicker at the edge, and then it reduces down in thickness as it travels down towards the drain, so that we get our 1/4 inch per foot, or 2% slope that's required to get it into the drain. It just folds open. It's a really high density expanded polystyrene, by the way, folks. So you're not limited to any size tile. You could put the smallest mosaic on there if you'd like, or a large format up to, say, a 4-inch or 6-inch before it stops conforming to the slope in the tray. But you can see what he's doing now. He's just going to walk it into the place to make certain it's firmly embedded down into that bond coat, so it's fully supported and adhered down in. And that's all it is to put it in place, to put in the tray. So can you imagine the traditional systems with packing the mortar and then needing to put the waterproofing over the top? This, we put it all in one step, and you can see that there's a recess there in the middle that's actually there to accommodate the thickness of our integrated bonding flange of our Curdy drain. So we'll be putting that in here in the next demonstration, but you can see here he's actually going to put that in place. So first we put a little bit of thin set right in that recess so we can have full support of that drain. This is our 2-inch tailpiece that we've got here that'll connect into, this is black, so this would be one of our ABS plastic drains, but we do make those in PVC for those that have a PVC waistline in the home. And then this is going to just be firmly embedded. You can see it's got those trapezoid punch outs around the perimeter that are going to give us a mechanical grab once we place it into that recess. And you can see what Alfredo's doing. He's just pressing it in there, giving it a little bit of a steering wheel effect so that that thin set oozes out between the trapezoids. And now we know we have a good mechanical bond of that integrated bonding flange down in there. And you can see that it's now flush with the top of the tray. We'll waterproof this in the next segment that we'll get to here in a few minutes, but he's just going to clean that up. You notice that there's a fleece actually bonded to that bonding flange. That's what's going to give the ability of the waterproofing to bond to it. Now, here's one of our trays that we looked at. You could certainly build your tray on your job site with several different materials, but this time we're going to be using our own tray, or our own curb made out of Curdy board. You can see the baffles in here that keep it at a uniform width so it doesn't squeeze in at the bottom. Really doesn't need to be there for support, but that can actually be put in place here. We're going to use that same notch trowel that we used earlier, that 1/4 by 3/8, to apply some bond coat, some thin set, to all the surfaces that the curb is going to come in contact with. So we're putting it on the return wall. We're also applying it to the floor, of course, and even the edge of that tray where it's going to abut, we're going to put it in there so that we make certain that we get it put on there properly, and it's going to bond in and become very secure. These folks really don't have any limitations. If you want to set a shower door, frameless, glass block, whatever you want to do after you put these in and tile it, you're certainly welcome to do that. So we've engineered this stuff for a very extreme load-bearing potential. So it's just going to go right in place. We did a little short one here to just give you an idea of how it goes in place. He can press that down in place. If you actually wanted to take a level and set it on the top to level it up, you certainly could do that, and then level it into the bond coat so you could get the top of the curb level. I know the shower door people certainly appreciate that when they come to seat the door, if you're doing that, or whatever, if you're tiling it or putting whatever. Now, there are other pieces. We're not going to put them in here, but you could see if we're going to make a two wall shower like this is, and do 2 curbs, you can certainly join them together by just abutting them together. So that's how you would put in the major components into this assembly. But we're actually going to move next door to another shower that's a little bit farther along than the one we're having here, because we just don't have the time to watch Alfredo put all the waterproofing and all the pieces in. So we're going to join him in the shower, the next one over. You can see here in this one that he's got the Curdy board on. He's got all the patches on the penetrations. He's got the Curdy on the adjacent wall, which we watched him do over drywall. So that's all in place in there. Okay, so yep, all the fasteners are done. The mixer valve seal's in place. The pipe seal's in place. The curb that we just watched him do, and the tray and the drain, those are all in. So we've done already, looks like, Alfredo, you've done some of the inside corners already. You've got those in place, and some of the Curdy band, like on the wall opposite you. You've already got that in. But we can watch Alfredo do an inside corner and an outside corner and some banding here. So go ahead there, and I'll give you the play-by-play as Alfredo does all the work. I kind of like this gig there, that I'm sitting here in the comfort of my own home, and Alfredo's the one that's actually doing the troweling, aren't you? So, there we go. So the same principle applies here, right, Alfredo? You add a little thin set, make sure you burn it in with the flat side, and then you flip the trowel around to the notch side. And again, we're back to that small notch, that 8x8 square notch. Or if you have a 3/16 V notch, you could use that if you already have that kind of trowel. Or you can get these trowels from us or from Ruby, who makes these for us, a tile tool company you may be familiar with. One piece corner goes in place. And now he's going to use one trowel to hold the piece in tight as he smooths out the membrane and firmly embeds it into the bond coat, eliminating any blisters, air bubbles, and of course knocking down the notches that he used to gauge how much thin set he was applying there. So that's a very simple and quick process to do those seams. You can see he's got that done already. He already did the inside corner that's right underneath his left hand there on the curb, so we don't need to do that one. Yeah, thank you, Alfredo. So he's using the same process as we saw in the animation, which is he's going to use our Curdy band. And this is our thinnest Curdy band, which is 4 mils thick and also 5 inches wide. So he's folded it lengthwise like you saw in the animations a little earlier, folks. So he's folded it lengthwise. So we basically have 2.5 inches going up the wall and 2.5 inches onto the tray, which more than exceeds our 2-inch minimum requirement at Schluter-Systems. So now he's got all the thin set applied with that small notch again. And now he's taking the Curdy band. You can see there, he's pre-folded it down the middle. You can see that he's done that. Alfredo, you didn't go as far as to use your iron and ironing board on this to give it a seam, did you? I've seen him do that, folks. Actually use the ironing board to get it seamed down the middle. But all we're asking here is that it goes, see, notice it doesn't go clear into the corner where we can get a buildup of 2 or 3 layers. We don't want to do that. Our only requirement, as I said earlier, is a 2-inch overlap. So he's brought that Curdy band 2 inches onto the inside corners at each end of his Curdy band, which does meet our requirements, but it also keeps the thickness down to a minimum thickness of layers of Curdy that are in that inside corner there. So you can see how he did that by just having that Curdy band reach 2 inches onto those 2 inside corners at both ends of the Curdy band. So again, we just wanted to show you there briefly how that goes together to do that tray to wall, that shower pan to wall connection. You could certainly do that in the inside vertical corners, but you see what we opted to do, where you can see in that inside corner that we actually extended our Curdy 2 inches longer than it needed to be to waterproof that drywall wall. And we actually treated the inside corner at the same time as we treated the wall and extended it 2 inches on. So you can see what Alfredo's done. He's taking that other piece of Curdy carrot corner that's going to treat that troublesome spot. Folks, how many times have you seen this in existing showers where this is always a place where the grout cracks, the water gets into the assembly and starts water damage. It's where the curb abuts to the return wall. So this is actually a requirement in the tile industry that whether you use a traditional system with a pan liner, as we saw in our earlier animation, or in this case, where we're doing a sealed system with our Curdy system, it requires that you use a one-piece boot to actually address that curb to wall connection. So that's why we have that one piece. He's back folding that a little bit from how it's been stored in the box with the drain. And he's put that in place, and you can see how nicely it addresses that curb to wall connection and folds down over the edge, giving you a nice waterproof seal. Now, within 24 hours, folks, of this all being put together, you can actually flood test this thing. This is a totally waterproof system, ready to actually be used as a shower, if you would. The tile, as I said earlier, is simply a decorative wear surface, a thin veneer. That's your decorative veneer. It's the assembly behind the tile that's actually giving you your moisture management and managing the water in both its liquid and its vapor form. So now he's got that all put in place and ready to go. Now, as I said earlier, if you need to have a shorter wait time before flood testing, we actually have a rapid setting thin set that you could get from us, and that could cut down your wait time, your drying time before flood testing to 6 hours. So keep that in mind. All right, looks like now Alfredo's ready to address putting in the drain assembly. So I think we've got just a little mosaic to put in around this. We're not going to tile the whole tray in front of you, but we're going to put a little mosaic in so we can show you the process of how to put this drain grate assembly in. So we'll put that thin set down there. Again, this is the notch trowel that's suitable for the size tile we're putting here, which I believe Alfredo is it a 2x2 mosaic or a 1x1? I'm not certain. He's got it here. Okay, so it's a 2-inch by 2-inch mosaic that we're going to put in place. So he used an adequate notch trowel for that. But before we get to that, we need to connect. I almost forgot. Oh my gosh, I'm glad you grabbed that, Alfredo. You never forget. I'm obviously forgetful here. So we need to tie in the waterproofing that's on the tray, the Curdy that's on the tray, to the integrated bonding flange that we had installed in the mock-up that he moved over from, the one that's neighboring there. So he used, again, that very small notch trowel that we use for Curdy, which is an 8x8 square, 3/16 V, or 3 millimeter square notch to gauge the thin set. And now he's doing the same process as we used to do all the Curdy. He's firmly embedding that Curdy band into that bond coat to knock down any of the ridges and to move out any air bubbles or blisters. Now there's a recess in the tray, folks, to accommodate the bond coat thickness under that band and the actual band itself. So there was a recess that he went into, so there's no bump as you go off of our tray and onto that band you just saw Alfredo do. The other recess that's in that drain is actually for the drain grate assembly that Alfredo is going to do now. So there's your drain grate. You can see that it's square. It's 4-inch square. It has a couple of access screws. If you ever need to do any maintenance inside the drain, you can take those 2 screws off and take that middle of that drain grate off and leave the frame. And then here's a collar that just snaps right on to that drain grate. And there's a couple of tabs there that give you a friction fit and onto that lip that's around on the drain grate. And you can see you snap that on place. So that's in. And then this is a friction fit, but it also has a few barbs on there that are going to hold it in place. So you want the barbs to go in the right direction, to face down. Also on that collar, there's 2 elongated trapezoids. Now those should line up with the access drain screws. So those screws come out the backside of that grate just a tiny bit. And so if you're going to use a really thin mosaic, you have to make certain that those screws can bypass that collar that Alfredo just slipped on there. That's why we put 2 larger or elongated trapezoidal punch outs into that collar. So now what we need to do is fill in that last little recess that's around the drain with some thin set. Get that filled up because that's what's going to support the drain collar. Another thing that's going to support the drain under load when somebody stands on it is we're actually going to back butter underneath that drain grate. Now, Alfredo's going to use his margin trowel there, and he's going to put some thin set underneath that drain grate. Yeah, you tip it up just a little bit more there, Alfredo, so the other way, so we can see. There you go. Now we can see him actually put some thin set in there to support that. Now, the nice thing about our adjustable drain grate assembly, it can accommodate a tile anywhere from as thick as 1.5 inches clear down to the thinnest mosaic on the market that you could use. So anywhere from that thicker one to the thinner one and anywhere in between, because we have that adjustability and it's going to be supported. So now he's going to just place that down into that recess he filled with thin set. You can see the kind of a little bit of leeway we have there. You have a little bit of adjustability front to back, side to side to get rid of maybe a little sliver cut of tile or make it a little bit bigger, a little bit of adjustability. You can put that on the diagonal. You can put it any direction you want. So now he's put that in place. And now the next step is to put the tile down. Now we're back to the step of installing the tile here that I started to tell you about earlier. So now he's using the notch trowel that's suitable for that 2x2 mosaic, which is fairly small. And he's going ahead and burning that thin set in with the flat side of his trowel. Good tile setting practice, regardless of what the environment is or what size tile you use. Always burn in the thin set and then just use your last few strokes to gauge how much thin set you're going to leave for the suitable for the tile. And now he's going to place the 2x2 all around the drain grate. And since that's a 4-inch drain grate, you can see that it fits perfectly around full tile all the way around. And now he's going to use a grout float to make certain he firmly embeds and sets the tile down into the bond coat to make certain it's adhered and supported. And then the last thing he's going to do here is actually tap down the drain grate so it's flush with the top of the tile, or maybe just a tiny bit lower than the tile around it. But don't push it down too far, because if you push it down too far and expose too much of the tile around the edge, you'll have to pull the tile up around there, pull that grate assembly out of there, and push that height adjustment collar out of the way a little bit, and then put it back in. You can do notice that something that Alfredo and that a lot of us do in the tile industry. When you press a mosaic into the thin set and get adequate bond, you'll find that you will also have some thin set come up through those grout lines. So this is a nice little tip and trick here in the tile business, is to take just an old paintbrush, and you can see he cut off the bristles pretty short, and he's used that to remove the grout, to remove the thin set in the grout lines, so that when we go to grout it, he doesn't have a lot of cleanup to do before grouting, and the grout is an ample mass or thickness in there to hold itself in, and you don't have to do a bunch of cleaning. Certainly, we don't want to start cleaning out excess thin set from in between the grout lines with a knife, like a box knife or utility knife, like so many people like to do. Why? Because our Curdy is right below that. Our waterproofing is right below that, and you don't want to damage it. So nice little tip and trick there in general, and certainly a nice one there for our Curdy system. So I know, folks, this was pretty brief. We certainly have longer videos, and we saw the whole thing in the animation. But again, Alfredo, I do want to thank you for doing that work. We appreciate you sticking around here. Alfredo's on East Coast time because he's in our Montreal studio all by himself. Poor guy, working, burning the midnight oil, if you will, to put that in. So we appreciate it.
Welcome.
Anything else you want to add that I missed there, Alfredo, in my play-by-play?
I think you covered everything, Andy. Great job.
Okay. Thanks very much. Okay. So we'll wrap things up here a little bit. So we took a look at quite a bit here in a short amount of time. You can see that we have a comprehensive approach to this moisture management, and it is truly moisture management, where it is moisture in both its liquid and vapor forms. And when I mean comprehensive, it's a full system, it's an integrated system. We're looking at it from a system approach so that it takes care of all of the challenges you have in a wet area like this. You can see that it could be very quick to actually install this and get ready for tile. That usually takes a considerable amount of time to prep a shower for tile, let let alone doing the tile. And of course, you get a single source warranty since the whole system is integrated from one manufacturer. So keep that in mind too. Now, as far as the support and resources we have available for you, certainly we have installation handbooks that you can request online. If you do buy our materials, the handbooks do come in the boxes of the shower kits or in the rolls of Curdy, so you'll have one there. We have brochures that you could use. When I was a tile contractor out in Northern California, I liked having the brochures so I could tell the potential customer, the consumer, when I was doing a bid on their home, this is the system I use, and give you a little bit of information about why I use the system and features and benefits. The same thing with the pamphlets. And of course, there's lots of samples available for you. You could get those samples too. We do a lot of training. As Brian mentioned earlier, we have our in-person training, our workshop for professionals. We'd love to see you there. We're starting to open those back up in selective markets across the country where it's safe now for health issues and reasons. So you can come visit us there. And if not, we do have our online training too, where you can see these type of topics, where we put that whole system in, and a lot of our systems, the in-floor heating, our Dietra uncoupling, a lot of profiles that we use. So come and join us there too. We have those type of events for you too that you could join. Of course, stay connected with Schluter on all the different social media. Become part of the community of professionals in the tile industry or in the building industry in general. So you could certainly join us there. And of course, we've got all types of videos online right now in various languages, lots of product information. We have full start to finish installation videos. We also have small tips and tricks. We've cut things down into various categories so you don't have to watch a whole video. If you just wanted to see what Alfredo did, for instance, putting that drain grate assembly in, you could watch that too. So keep those in mind, that we have all of those type of things available too for you. Just make certain you go to Schluter-Systems 1 if you go to YouTube. There's a lot of videos out there that are done by privateers, not official Schluter videos. And I do enjoy watching a lot of those. People do a lot of neat things. But I'll be honest with you, there's a few out there that scare me to death too. So just to be on the safe side, maybe you could go to the ones that are the Schluter ones. That way you know you're getting the right information from us. So keep that in mind. We have those too. Also, Schluter.com, of course, you have that. And we have an 800 number that's available from 8 a.m. Eastern to 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can talk to a real human being there. We've got a lot of knowledgeable and friendly people. So keep that in mind, whether you're in US or Canada. We're certainly there and available if you want to give us a call. You can request samples. You can get one of those installation handbooks. You can ask different questions. You can find out who your local rep is. I know that Hugo and Andy have been busy answering a lot of questions. And sometimes the question is just a little too involved for us to try to answer in a few sentences online. So perhaps they said, find out who your rep is in your local area. We have over 150 representatives in North America that are there, and they'll be available for you to guide you through your project and answer your installation questions. Almost all of them came right out of the field as tile contractors and tile installers. So they're a good source for knowledge too. So keep them in mind. So with that, we're now to the actual Q&A. So we have a little bit of time left here. We had an hour allotted, so we're doing fine here on time. But we can if we have a couple questions before we fill up. Before we close this up, but one of our hosts is saying, yeah, that's just about it. I don't know how many other questions we have, but if Hugo and Andy want to chime in at this point, or if we have any, if not, we'll probably sign off here pretty quick, I imagine. Hey, Hugo.
Andy. Yeah, we've been trying to keep up with the questions coming in.
Yeah, I could see on the side here. I've been glancing over and going, oh my gosh, you guys are busy.
Right, and unfortunately, I didn't have the opportunity to really listen to your presentation. I don't know if you covered this, but one of the questions that often comes, when we explained this system is whether the curtain membrane can be installed horizontally, vertically. I don't know if you covered that. And, if we have to work like a roof shingle, could you elaborate on that if you haven't?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, that is a great question. Thanks for sharing that, Hugo. That
No
is
problem.
A good one. Yeah, 2-inch overlap is all really required. It doesn't matter if the top one overlaps the bottom one or vice versa. There's no shingle lap requirement. We don't need it. I mean, if you think about it for a minute, if we required a shingle lap in order for our system to waterproof correctly, we wouldn't have much of a system to offer you. So the nice thing is the flexibility for the installer. You put that piece in first, you put the other piece in, it doesn't matter. All we require is a 2-inch overlap. Vertical, horizontal, it's up to you, however you want to do it. You can see in Alfredo's, he actually did vertical in one of the mock-ups and he did horizontal in the other. So yeah, that's a great question. So good. There is a question here asking that let people know for the novice, we need to search the website by issue or project, not by product. That's right. We really don't sell products at Schluter as much as we look at applications. We look at an application and go, what do you need in a shower? What kind of functionalities do you need? Same thing with a floor. If you search at Schluter for floors, go to floor and say, what do you need out of your floor? Do you need to isolate the tile from potential damage by the substrate called uncoupling? Do you need to waterproof the floor below the tile if it's a moisture sensitive building material like a plywood or OSB? How about you want to introduce heat into the floor? Dietrich heat we have. So yes, you always look at things from applications. So go to the application you're planning on doing, and then you can see the systems that we have available. So DT, thanks for that little tip. We appreciate that. Okay, well, if that's it, we were supposed to be over a few minutes ago. So I do want to thank all of you for joining us here. We certainly appreciate your time. We know it's valuable. I hope you found this informative and that it was worth your time. Come and see us again at either in person or some of our onlines. And I think we're going to be invited back here from Fine Homebuilding to do some other topics down the road. So that could be something. So again, thanks very much. We appreciate your time. Appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one.